Welcome back, everyone. For our first episode of 2019, we thought we'd put together a pretty quick episode with some productivity tips for the Mac. Make sure to check us out on Facebook and give us a like. Jump over to YouTube and click the subscribe button, and do be sure to click the notification bell so you can be notified with every new episode.
Music, blah 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 blah. And here we are. So
Felipe, when you are not actively working on a project, or not directly working in your NLE, how much time would you say you spend in Finder, clicking around, navigating files, labeling stuff, searching?
a lot. I think Finder is like that one very basic app that everyone uses, right? Is your first contact with media most of the time. Is like you're getting from your memory card to somewhere on your hard drive, and even if you're using other applications to do the transfer, at some point you are dealing with Finder. So yeah, Finder is that one application.
It's the one application on the Mac that you can't quit. Also, it's constantly running, so you have to deal with it every time you do anything, really. And so I actually have 5 tips today on how to more efficiently work with the Finder and how to get a little bit more value out of it, with a little brief foray into Automator, which is an app that comes installed on every Mac. So we'll start off with tip number 1. All right, the first tip is a real simple one. It's simply changing Finder views. So here I've got a Finder window, and I've got one folder open, the battery naming sample, and you can switch from icon view, list view, column view, or I believe that's called the cover flow. I forgot what that's called now, actually.
I think they just renamed now with this last version.
Oh yeah, because you have the metadata option on the column on the right. Regardless, you can easily use your keyboard shortcut to navigate between them, and it works in order. So from left to right, it would be Command 1, Command 2, Command 3, and Command 4. You can go in any order, skip around, but it's a very easy way because, for example, I'm very frequently working in column view because it's easier for me to jump around and find what I'm looking for. But in list view or Command 2, that's where you can have your different columns of information. So you can see the size or Finder tags, which we will get to, comments, which we'll also get to, and additional information. And I should mention that if you right-click on the top, you can click to add different categories of information, or you can turn them off if you don't want to see them anymore. So, for example, if you don't want to see date modified, click it, and it's no longer in your view. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is a custom Automator script that I created using Automator. Automator is on every Mac, and when you create what's called an Automator service, it's stored in a very specific location on your Mac. So if you go to the top menu to Go, and go to your user library, which by default is hidden. So if you hit Option, you'll see it toggling there. Then you can choose your library. I've got mine open here already. And you just navigate down to your services folder. And here you can see the 2 that I've created and published. And if you were to select one, right-click, and go to Open with Automator, which again I've done here, you can see these 2 automators that I've opened, and also how to create them. So here it's simply the workflow receives current file or folder in Finder, and there's an action applied. And then I've dragged this set spotlight comments for Finder items. That's for the add Finder metadata workflow. And the way that works is, for example, if I've got a bunch of files that I would like to add information to, you can select one file and press Command I, or if you've added this to the Finder, press your Get Info. This will show you information about that file. And you could add a comment in there and it'll appear here. But if you wanted to do that to multiple files, you would have to do them one by one. So instead, I've created an Automator script so you can select all your files, right-click, and at the bottom where it says Services, choose Add Finder Metadata. And so here I could type sound effects. And I'm going to uncheck this and click Continue. And now you'll see this comment added to all the files. When I get back from a shoot, I tend to add to all my video files the camera that was used or the external monitor. For audio files, I would add a comment for the audio recorder used or the microphone. That way, if I have to repeat a shoot for a client, or if there's some problem I need to trace back, I know what gear to assemble, or I know what gear to inspect for problems. So that's one thing to do for the add finder metadata. The other tip is also Automator, and that is the batch rename. So that's set up very similar. The workflow receives files or folders in Finder app, and get selected Finder items, and then you basically all you're doing is you're selecting this and dragging these in here, and that's how you create the script. And then you go to File, Save, and then this is how it's set up. So if you wanted to create this, just take a screenshot and set your Automator script up the exact same way. And the way that works is very similar. So select all these files, right-click, under Services, choose Batch Rename, and you've got a bunch of different options here. So if I wanted to rename them all, I could add a new name and just call it Beep, say. And then here you can add sequential numbers. You can have them start at 1, or for example, if you have 13 here and on day 2 you record another 13, you could start that at 14. So let's just try that. So here it would start from 14 on. I'll open that up again to show you another option. You could also, from this drop-down, choose Replace Text. So for example, if you want to keep the numbering, but you don't like that it's called beep, you could find beep and replace it with alarm, and choose Continue. And now you've batch renamed all these files. So there are lots of different options in there. I found it incredibly useful because I'm constantly batch renaming files. And I found it really useful.
But just a comment, for example, this Automator that you just showed, renaming files, it's something that I started using very frequently. Sometimes I'm actually not sure if Automator is actually making a mistake between the first and the second file. I don't know if you ever noticed that, or if it's just me, or there is something weird.
It's just you.
I list everything in the correct order there, and then I put it to rename and add the number sequentially. And the first and the second file, they seem to be inverted, but I think that could be just me. But I use now very frequently, as some people know here before, I used to not rename any files, and now I always rename them before getting to the NLE.
Why? Why did you start doing that?
Because I'm not stupid. No, but very seriously.
You just pissed off 3/4 of our audience, I'm sure.
No, very seriously. I don't ever need to go back to a memory card to look for something. I don't necessarily archive the memory card. I import them, I check everything, and then that file that has been checked is the one that I will archive. So I'm not archiving hero media. And what that means for me is that, for example, if I use an application like eFlow Pro where I want to list every single file that I have, files like P0012345, they don't tell me anything at all. And then I have to be looking at what is the file structure for me to find it. Whereas I could have all that feedback directly on the file name level. So that's why I have been renaming it. Since we had that discussion a long time ago, I used to really not rename. But then when I started going back to old archives, and I actually spent last week going through 2 terabytes of old videos, and all of them IMG 1234 and things like that, I had to open file by file and start putting them in their own separate folders, and then going there inside the folders and renaming the files. So for me today, I prefer to rename. And of course, some people are going to say, oh, but how do you refer back to the NLE? Well, I rename before I ever get to the NLE. So once I get to the NLE, the first thing that the NLE knows is the renamed file. So that's what I do.
Yeah, the 2 things that makes me think of is, one, the only time I don't is when I frequently get a lot of footage from the Sony FS7, which has MXF and sidecar files, which I can't batch rename because the NLE it really imports one of them, so it kind of messes up the flow. So it really only works for self-contained files.
Well, I have a Sony camera as well that also records AVC HD. This one here. It's an old Nex camera.
Okay.
And come on, focus on the camera. Yes, there it is. This camera, it was quite a little workhorse for me. It has done a lot of videos. And what I do is to import on Final Cut Pro 10. Now, this is a little bit more work, I admit. I put the memory card in. I use the import dialog from Final Cut Pro 10 as copy media, of course, from the card to the hard drive. And it will create clip 1, clip 2, clip 3, clip 4, as it's normal for every single Sony camera. It never keeps track of the names, mainly if you're rewrapping. And then once I have those, I go on the Finder level. I move them away from where Final Cut has put them, because now they are all rewrapped, and then I rename.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's a little bit more work, but at least it keeps me on the same level as the other cameras, for example. I wouldn't do that for RED cameras either. RED cameras I wouldn't problems. Rename. Yeah.
Well, or for example, in my case, where I'll come back from a shoot for this client that has the Sony, and I will have a copy of the media, and they have a copy of the media. So if I convert all the files or batch rename them, I'm only sending them the Final Cut library back, so that will not relink to the media that they have that isn't renamed. So this is an example where it's a no-go for me.
Yeah, but I mean, the renaming has to be, if you're in a group, everyone in the group has to use the renamed media, right?
Yeah. So it's not a totally infallible system, but
which like, let's say if you are on set, the DIT could be renaming everything. So everyone is getting the footage from the DIT. But of course, then there is the part where they might not even be ever formatting the cards, and they have all the cards there archived for quite a long time. So yeah, maybe you don't rename, because then that file that you renamed, you don't know where it belongs from, if you need to reference the file back on a card, because either had a problem importing or something like that. So of course, it's not for everything.
This would be a little more time consuming, but if you did want to rename the file, you could also put the original camera file name as a Finder comment on each file, so you have a way of tracing back to the source. But yeah, that would be a little time consuming.
Yeah, of course. Again, these workflows are always customized to the task at hand. I'm not gonna say this is it, I will always do that and whatever. No. We know.
Yeah. Well, let me before we get to your tips, I've got 2 more to cover. And the first one is, which I hinted at earlier, if you select a file and press Command I, you've got this Get Info window where you see all this info. Well, that's where we added this Finder comment. However, if I click on this clip, the window changes, actually stays with that original clip. It's not context sensitive. So let me close that window. There is a keyboard shortcut, and I don't recall where I learned this, but instead of Command I, if you press Option Command I, and that opened up on the other monitor, I'll drag this over. Now you've got a window that stays on the screen, and I'm just using my arrow keys to move up and down. It's context sensitive, so you don't have to keep opening and closing a Finder window every time. You can just jump through your files and get the information you need. So I don't know, have you do you know about this? Have you used
this?
No.
I have been using macOS for a long time. I love keyboard shortcuts. I use them a lot, and I didn't know this one.
Okay. Yeah, it was I'm always using that Get Info window, of course, because I'm always adding these comments. So that was huge for me. It was a big time saver. Now, the last tip I have is a slightly more involved, and it's not new. Everybody who has a Mac should at least be somewhat familiar with these, but this is Finder tags. Finder tags are a way of quickly identifying or grouping or locating media. It's just one method among many. And you can see on the left here on my sidebar, I've got a handful of Finder tags that I use for most things. So for example, well, let me get started with how to create a Finder tag. If you go to your Finder preferences or Command comma, and click over to the tags section, this shows all the tags that are on your computer. And you can always click plus to add a tag, and we'll just call this temporary. So now we've got our temporary tag with no color. So if you right click on it, you can choose from these colors. It would be nice if they had more, but that's also true for Final Cut 10. I wish they had more color options, but let's just make this blue for now. And so you've got a temporary tag. Sometimes it can be a little buggy and it won't update here. So let me just close this Finder window and open up a new one. And now temporary is blue. So that's just a little bug. But if I navigate back to my battery naming sample, if I had a bunch of clips that this might not be the best example of temporary, but for whatever reason you had to label them temporary, there are a few ways to apply the tag. You could right click and choose where are we here, tags, and then that'll take you to this item. Another thing is in your Finder menu bar, you could add a tag, which is kind of the same thing. Or if your sidebar is open, you can simply, I'm just clicking and dragging, click and drag it onto that, and boom, you'll see the color label and the temporary tag. Now, if you wanted to remove the tags, you could see the tags and simply press delete there, which we'll do. So that's going to remove the tag from those individual files. And I'm not sure it actually took. Yeah, it's just taken a minute. And the other thing you can do is if I hold Command comma, you can select it from Finder and choose delete, and that will delete the actual tag from your computer. So if you had a tag you didn't want to see ever again, that's how you do that. Where that can be really useful is, for example, I have a project folder structure that I created that I have zipped. So I can double click that, and then this I just populate with the project and client name. And every project I've ever done has this exact same folder structure with subfolders and so on. And these color labels help me quickly identify what's what. So I just know that audio is always green, so I don't even have to read it. I just look for the green, and there's my tag. Another advantage is I could go to audio here, and this will show me every audio folder on every connected hard drive. In this case, I have audio and video tags on my production media. So that's where it's just a really nice way to visually identify files, to track things down, to look for media and what's going on. And I highly recommend you guys start using Finder tags. It can be really great if you have a lot of photos, for example. Felipe, how or have you integrated Finder tags into your workflow at all?
I did. In my case, I have basically a list of clients, and each client has a number ID. So I go 001, client A, 002, client B, 003, client C, and so on and so forth. But that means that my list is not in alphabetical order. It's in numerical order by whoever came first in terms of clients. So on the top level, I use Finder tags with the name of the client, so I can actually sort by the name of the client. And instead of having 001 and a client that starts with the letter Z, I can filter, sort by the tag names, and I see only the name of the client. That's one of the ways that I use Finder tags. The other one is to mark pieces of a project. So if that is media, if it's a project file, if it's documents, if it's master files, if it's deliverable files. So each one of them have colored Finder tags very similar to what you use. And I tried to use comments on Finder, but for me, it didn't fit so much into my workflow. I don't look at that much information on Finder. I think what I do most on Finder is searching. So, and I love using Spotlight. Spotlight is very fast. So it's very easy to look for things, and if they are tagged, and then those tags, they carry to Final Cut if you decide to import the Finder tags as keywords, so it's very nice.
Yeah, well, exactly. Final Cut has another option, which is you can, in your preferences, you can check create keyword collection from folder or from Finder tag. So if you had a group of media in a folder called Zoom F8 for the Zoom F8 recorder, and inside there were all the audio, say the VO files for that shoot, you could have, if you had both options selected in Final Cut, it would create a keyword collection for Zoom F8. So you could click on that and all those files would be grouped. Or you could have separate Finder tags for inside there. For example, you could have the first 3 files were Debbie. You could have a green tag for Debbie and a red tag for Bob. And you would have separate keyword collections for that. That's just one example, but it's a very nice little feature inside Final Cut. And speaking of, you have some more video editing specific tips for us, don't you?
Yeah, the first one, well, so I basically have 3 tips. The first one is, I'm not gonna have here how, maybe I can demonstrate. So let me go here on my Final Cut. And here on Final Cut, I have one specific media that's very long, which is basically a movie. I just imported that movie here just to use as an example. And I will turn on waveforms. So let's pretend that this is maybe an interview with someone and you got that super long file, and that interview has several sections that you want to separate. Maybe you want to separate per questions, or you want to separate per takes. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna just really look at the waveform. And for example, this is here a very quiet section, and is the section in between questions. So for example, I could just use I and O and then delete. So I marked this as rejected, and you see that now there is this red bar on top of the file. And I will reject another section here. So we're just gonna pretend that this is another section here that's another quiet one, and another one here that is also quiet. I'm gonna click on delete again. And for the rest of the file here, I will delete as well. So let's say these are the things that are not useful. Now I only have unselected or unrated the parts of the media that really have something that's interesting. If I do yes?
But they're not gone forever. So
they're not
if
gone
you did
forever.
make a
This is
mistake,
just metadata.
Yeah.
And so you're just tagging, you're just literally tagging within Final Cut that portion is not interesting. And if you do Control-H for hide rejected, or go up here on the top and click on hide rejected, you're going to see these now as separate clips. So now see here that I have 4 clips. They are all part of the same big clip, but now visually you see them as separate clips. Now you can imagine that this first one is the first question, the second one is the second, the third one is the third, and the fourth one is the fourth question. Now if you put this in list view, you're like, oh, all of them have exactly the same name. So that's still confusing, right? Yes, but then you can use Command K on the first one, for example, and you can add the keyword question 1, for example. And then you can go on the second one and you can do question 2. And you can also use these keyboard shortcuts that are here on the keyword window, and I can already add all the questions here. Now this will depend on how it is that you're organizing things, right? So I can now use Ctrl-2 for question number 2, Ctrl-3 for question number 3, and Ctrl-4 for question number 4. And now if I open the disclosure triangle here on my event on Final Cut, I have now keywords for question 1, question 2, question 3, and question 4. So I can see them separate from everything else. So this is my tip number 1.
That's a really nice tip. And I like the idea. I don't often enough take the time to reject those portions I don't want. I more work in the opposite fashion, which is to use the favorite. But I like this method better. I think I'm going to adopt that.
I think there is
because by
uses
calling
for
it a
both
favorite,
of them, right?
It's not necessarily my favorite. It's just I'm marking what I want to use, but it might not be my favorite section. So I'm kind of abusing that term favorite by following that approach. Yeah,
if you reject is like the stuff that you absolutely will not see, right? So I think in between keywords rejected and favorite and unrated, you actually have a very nice way of seeing things. Some people are going to use keywords with emojis. So it's actually an extra step of visually seeing if something is good or not. So it's quite interesting.
Okay. Real quick, can you show us, before you jump to your next tip, if somebody was to reject a portion of their clip and they decide, oh man, I need that back, how do you
Of course.
How do you unreject a clip?
Yeah, so here on the browser, I'm going to do Ctrl-C to show all clips again. And I will put here on my film strip, and I will just expand this film strip a little bit. So we can see all the portions. And right here, for example, I have a rejected portion. It has the red label on the top of it. So the one way that you can do that is using I and O to select again that part. And you can use the letter U to unrate.
You can just click right on the red bar and it'll select that range too.
You can
Same
do
thing with favorites.
Yeah, because the reason why I said first the I and O is because it could happen that you maybe only want to unrate or
a section of the previously
a section of that,
clip.
but not everything. So if it's a section, I and O, and then you use the letter U, and it's going to remove that tag of rejected. If you want everything, like Gabriel said, you click on the red portion. It's going to select all of it, and then you click on letter U, and it will unrate that. And another thing that's also interesting is now, for example, if I try to click anywhere else in this clip, I have that selected portion there selected. So how do I now, for example, select the whole clip? I can just use the letter X, and it will select the whole clip. So those
It'll reset your range. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and one thing I want to mention quickly is that I'm certain that when people are learning Final Cut, if you have a clip you want to remove from the browser, you might think you press delete, which of course won't work. Delete is going to be what adds the reject range, as you just showed. So if somebody wanted to actually remove a clip from the browser, what command key do they use with delete to do that? You mean
to remove completely from your NLE?
Yeah.
So you don't see it again. Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, it will only remove completely from the NLE if you're removing the last reference of that clip. So
okay, that's a good point. Yeah.
So if that clip is in a project and you do command delete, which is to throw the clip in the trash, it will not remove from your actual general library because that clip is still referenced in a project.
Or the other way around.
Or the other way around, yeah.
If it's in the browser and you delete it from the timeline, it's still in the browser. If you delete it from the browser and it's in the project, it'll stay in the project.
Yeah.
And then if you try to delete that project clip, it'll give you a warning. The last reference.
Yes, exactly.
So
okay. Only when you're about to about to delete the last reference clip, that's when you get the warning, and it will delete it will actually delete the clip if it's in a managed library. So if you're keeping all your media inside the Final Cut library, inside Final Cut's bundle, but if that media is external, it's not inside the library, it will not delete that media. It will only delete within your library project. So those are, I think media management could be a whole episode, because it's extremely important. I see a lot of people on Twitter, for example, asking, oh, how can I make my library not occupy 500 gigabytes? First thing that I would recommend is for you to do a training on media management. There is a lot of them that are for free on YouTube, and there is Ripple training, they have theirs as well. So it's extremely important to understand how Final Cut manages the media.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to extend your first tip so long.
No worries. My second tip is related to effects. So if I have this clip here on my timeline, if I go to my effects browser, I have here color and sepia. If I just hover with my mouse over the sepia effect, you can see an immediate preview of that effect on my clip. Which
is a big time saver because you don't have to apply the clip to see how it's going to look and then delete the clip and then try a new one. But that's not new. We've had that since version 1 of Final Cut Pro 10.
Exactly. And that helps. Yeah, and that helps because if you have a lot of different effects, you can very quickly skim through them like you would be skimming on a browser and see which one that you want to use. Now, this is not new. It has been there since always. But the actual shortcut that I'm going to show you, I don't know since when it has been there. So let's take a look. Let's say that I will want to take a look at the sepia effect. I don't really like how it looks because there is too much sepia being applied here. But if I use the option button and I just skim my mouse left to right, you can see that's affecting the mix of that effect on my clip. Now, if you decide that you will use that effect on your clip, the very first thing that you want to do is to select the effect. So it's highlighted on the effect browser. Then you use the option key to decide which mix you want here of that effect. Once you're satisfied, you just double click and it will apply to your clip with that mix that you already previewed. So here it is.
That's really cool.
Yeah, now you have here a mix of 60.13% of that sepia. And this will work with a lot of different effects. It really depends if that amount or that mix is the very first published parameter on that effect.
Yeah, I was going to ask because some effects have multiple controls, and there's no way the option key
it will be
could
the first control
toggle.
that will be affecting.
Okay.
So, for example, if I would take a look at this tint here, now tint is highlighted.
I should mention that there's no such thing as too much sepia.
Oh my god. I found here a nice mix of this tint, and I would just double click on it, and now it applied with that mix. And you saw that actually the preview that the tint was giving me was on top of the sepia that I already had. So you're already stacking and previewing effects very easily here on Final Cut and very efficiently as well.
That's a really nice tip. Now to be fair, I had heard about that. And because we're several thousand miles away from each other, I have no idea what you just did. But I imagine when I get your media and I'm able to edit this, I will actually see firsthand what you did. But it sounds really cool. It sounds like a nice time saver where once you have a certain number of effects where you know what that first parameter is, an effect you use frequently, you would know which parameter is affected by holding the option key. And that way you could apply it at different levels as you're using it.
And then, of course, let's say that this order and this mix of effects that I just applied I really like, and I want to, in the future, use it, I just can click here in Save Effects Preset and select all the presets that I want saved, give it a name, a category where I want to save it, and save. And then later on, I can just apply that to any clip that I want. Now, my final tip is one related to a little painful process that a lot of people find on Final Cut, which is moving clips on the timeline because it's magnetic. So here I have two connected clips, and they're connected to two other clips on my main storyline. If I would like to move this clip here on my main storyline somewhere else, you'll see that my connected clip comes with. And you might not want to do that, right? You might be wanting to do only a move of your clip on the main storyline. So how do you do that? Well, you could move away the secondary clip and then move the primary, but then it's going to be a mess. You can imagine that if you have a very big timeline, that's just absolutely not good. Yeah. Now, there is a accent mark, a shortcut on your keyboard that's called grave, which is the accent mark to the left. Okay, normally is close to the left shift key, between the left shift key and the Z, or above the tab button before the number 1. So it depends on which keyboard you have. So that's the one that you're gonna press. So once you press that, you're gonna see this icon appearing here, which from afar it looks like an orange globe.
It's the override clip connections.
Yes. So what does that do? That pretty much ignores the clip connection. So now I'm able to move this clip away, and the other clip, because we're still in a magnetic timeline, the other clip here went there and closed the gap and basically replaced what I had. But what if you don't want to do that? You can use the position key with this grave button, and then tilde. You can move away. And is it a tilde on your keyboard? Because for me it's the grave button.
It's both.
Okay. So now I moved the primary storyline to somewhere else using the position key. The secondary clip that was connected stays there, now is connected to a gap. And that's how you do it. And
can you show us, while maintaining your secondary storyline or your connected clips, how do you put another clip into that gap, into just the duration of that gap?
From the browser?
Sure.
Okay, so now I have this gap here, and if I actually take a look at the duration of the gap, is actually 36 seconds. It's very long. Let's make this a little smaller so we actually can see what this is doing here. Yeah, I'm gonna do something like this. Now my gap is 17 seconds long. Okay, no problem. And what I want to do is go into my browser. I will select here a random portion of video. And what I need to do is to just have that gap selected on my timeline, the selected portion or clip on my browser, and do Option R, and now it's replaced on the timeline, and there you have replaced with that exact duration. You could just drag and drop on the gap, and then once you let it go, it's gonna ask replace from start, replace from end, and if you just choose replace from start, is basically the same thing that we just did. And there is so many other tips and tricks that we have within Final Cut, but these ones are some of the, let's say, less common ones that people use, and I find them quite useful.
Yeah, there are things, most of these things are things that are kind of staring you in the face all the time, but unless you know exactly what you're looking at, you don't know how to take advantage of them. I mean, everybody would have seen a Finder tag by now. Everybody has seen contextual menus, and they've obviously seen the different Finder view buttons. Any Final Cut editor would have seen the magnetic timeline, but based on the number of people online who have problems moving stuff around because they want to treat it like it's a track-based editing program, they can get hung up really quickly because they haven't taken the time to learn this stuff. So yeah, those tips are really useful, I think.
Yeah. So I guess that's it, right?
That's it. Really, yeah. We would love to hear from any of you if you found any of these useful, or any of them maybe misleading or superfluous, or if you have a better way to do what we have been attempting to achieve with these things, let us know, because this is just stuff we've come across and have either integrated or not. Although, Felipe, I think at some point, just like with batch renaming files, you will be adding Finder comments eventually, because I say so.
Maybe. Where I see myself adding the comments would be if there is, like, let's say a short film in which I want to reproduce the certain look and feel of a scene, I want to put that in the comments. But there are 100 different ways that you can do that as well on a spreadsheet, and then you use Shot Lister Pro or Shot Notes Pro, I think. There is 100 different ways that you can do the same.
A lot of this stuff is just an individual use case for these things, but these individual tips and tricks can be applied in many different ways. This is just a few of the different ways we've incorporated them into our workflows.
Okay.
You got anything else, Felipe?
That's all, I guess. And Happy New Year to everyone. And you're gonna be seeing a lot more videos from us this year.
That's the plan. I'm going to be gone for the next few weeks, so we're going to try to get, we have an episode tentatively scheduled for next Monday, Tuesday to be recorded. So hopefully that'll be able to go out while I'm gone for business. We're just waiting for that guest to confirm. But otherwise, we've got lots of episodes planned out.
Okay.
You want to wrap this up? You made me do the intro, you do the outro.
Okay, so guys, don't forget, if you liked this video, subscribe to our channel, like it, share it, and we really do appreciate your comments. We read all of them and we try to reply to all of them as well. So see you in the next video.